Hello and welcome to the Love History podcast, where we explore what happens when an LGBTQ plus historian and a mudlark chat to their friends about their shared love of history. I'm Marie-Louise Plum, known on socials as Old Father Thames.
And I'm Mock O'Keefe, and you can find me on all the socials, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube as Gay Aristo. And in this podcast, we talk to fellow history lovers, people working in history, and people who, through their lives, are making history.
So sit back, relax, make your beverage of choice, and welcome to the Love History podcast. Now, do remember to subscribe and follow so you can hear all the episodes in Series 1. So, Mock, what have you been up to, historically speaking, recently?
So I have been very interested recently in the World Monuments Fund. So the World Monuments Fund, I did a video with them on YouTube last year, and they work all over the world protecting heritage sites. And they are currently working on their watch list for 2024. These are historical sites that they think are in danger, whether they're falling apart, whether they need repair, whether they're in war zones. So I've been chatting to them and working with them and talking about doing some more videos with them and looking at some of the heritage buildings around the world that are at risk. So that's what I've been doing, but maybe more to come on that in the future. And how about you, historically speaking? What have you been up to?
I've been doing a lot of writing, actually. So I am writing something called The Tide Traveller's Guide. Now, I am a mudlark, but I'm the tide travelling mudlark. So I'm travelling through time on the tides of the River Thames and learning and researching about history through the finds that turn up on the Thames, the artefacts I find. Now, whether that is personal histories or a period of time, that is what I'm doing. And it's just lots and lots of a mixed bag of stories, just like the River Thames, out of context, throws up. One day it might be a Roman find, another day it might be a Georgian find. So I'm sort of hopping around all over the place, writing these stories about tide travelling. So yeah, that's me.
Oh my God, wow, that sounds fascinating. I can't wait to see or to read whatever it is that you write. Now, before we get on to our interview today, which is absolutely fascinating with Elowyn, and you'll introduce her in a moment, we've had a question sent in for you. And if anyone else would like to send us a question, please do. You can email us on lovehistorypodcast@gmail.com. So are you ready for your question?
I am very ready.
Okay, so it is a very Thames water-based question, and it's from Glenn, and he wants to know, what is the oldest ferry crossing on the Thames?
Aha, very interesting question, Glenn. Thank you. Well, I think there are two that I know of that are written about. Obviously, Roman London, there were crossings, whether they were ferries or, what. The ones that I have read about are in the medieval period, around 1100, there was a horse ferry crossing. So, Horse Ferry Road, that horse ferry. So how do you get your horses and carts from one side to the other? You have a horse ferry, which is a special kind of ferry to accommodate horses and carts I think it has a dip in the front, something like that. So the horses can be on the ferry, get across the river. That's around 1100. And then there's also another really interesting story, but it's more of a legendary story, again, around 1100, I think 1106 maybe, and that is about a ferry run by, allegedly, the father of St Mary Overy. This is all to do with Southwark Cathedral, and his and what was there before it was Southwark Cathedral, before it was I think it was a prior, a monastery. So John Overs was the ferryman, and he was this really miserly ferryman. And there's some really fantastic stories about him. So do have a little search online for John Overs or Ovaries or Overy and his daughter, St Mary Overy, and you will be in for a surprise. But yeah, so to answer, around 1100 are the ones I know of.
Lovely.
But enough about us. We have a very exciting show for you today. We sat down with Elowyn Stevenson, also known as Elowyn the Warrior. Now, Elowyn, yeah, she does a lot of really interesting stuff. Her background is in archaeology. She does a lot of historical teaching, practical teaching. She leads tours on the River Thames as part of Thames Explorer. But the thing that I'm most interested in is her adventures hitchhiking across Europe and South America. So let's have a listen to our interview and then we'll come back and chat about what we've learnt.
Fabulous. So let's go over to meet the warrior herself.
Elowyn, welcome to the Love History podcast. It's lovely to have you here.
So nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored.
So I've got to say, you've just got back from Morocco, right? So you've been traveling. You literally
Yep.
landed whenever, last night, I think. And
Actually, it was a very reasonable flight. It left from the middle of the Atlas Mountains at 11 a.m. and it was an on-time Ryanair flight, bang on 1:30 back at Stansted. So big ups to Ryanair. Basically empty flight. Everyone had their own aisle to sleep.
other airlines are available. But yeah, okay, so you got back and then immediately you were on the River Thames foreshore leading a guided tour. Was it for Thames Explorer? Is that what
It
you...
was for Thames Explorer Trust this morning with a lovely, lovely family. Yep.
Your background is in archaeology, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I studied archaeology at university, realized from the training digs that archaeology was a badly paid, very cold outdoor profession, and decided after I graduated that I'd rather go into a badly paid indoor profession working in museums and heritage sites. And from that, I've gotten lots of fun jobs working in the very hobbies that I enjoy. So I'm really, really grateful for the opportunities. But also, I have worked really hard to get where I am, and I'm very proud of what I've achieved. I now have 8 different jobs that I do all 0 hours, all
Wow.
freelance, which gives me the time to travel. So obviously, when I travel, I'm not getting any paid time off, but I've wrangled it pretty well, I think, and that I can save up, and I do travel very, very cheaply.
So you work the jobs to travel, which is so the main thing I want to talk to you about because it is so fascinating to follow you on Instagram, which is at elowyn.the.warrior.
Yeah, that's correct.
Elowyn the Warrior. And you travel around and you do these kind of daily video and image like blogs or vlogs about where you're going, the historic sites you're visiting, how you get there. And it's the how you get there that is so interesting. Will you tell us a bit about your adventures in hitchhiking across Eastern Europe, was it? And South America? Just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, usually. So I wasn't brave enough to hitchhike much in South America. I did hitchhike a little in Brazil in the countryside because generally speaking, wherever you go in the world, in the countryside is where people tend to not have cars, or they'll be more reliant on people that are driving pickup trucks and they can just flag down a ride and jump in. Which I think as well is the case around the UK. I think in the countryside, especially out in the West Country, down in Cornwall, I think there are still the last bastions of hitchhiking available in the UK.
Wow. A slight disclaimer, we're not advising you go hitchhiking, dear listener. We're just saying this is what
No,
Elowyn's doing.
no,
um,
definitely don't try this at home. It is a more risky way of traveling, certainly, and every Lonely Planet will say we do not advise hitchhiking. And I got into it because I trust that people are good and that it's a great way to get to know people, and you get dropped in places you would never visit on the bus. You get dropped in these tiny little villages in very, very rural Lithuania on the road where you wish that they hadn't left you, because then you're walking for 2 hours because it's a public holiday and all the cars are full of families and have no space, or there's no traffic. Um, but then you think, when else am I going to get dropped in rural Lithuania on a beautiful August day with all these butterflies and absolutely no traffic? And you just walk for a couple hours and trust that if you need to fill your water bottle, you could stop in a farmhouse and ask them, and they might even fill your water bottle and then say, oh, my cousin's popping by in half an hour, and they're driving in that direction. So this is the things that happen all the time when you take the risks and you put your faith in the goodness of people. And I don't know if you guys watched was it Race Across the World on BBC where they hitchhike and they get across. Fantastic.
Yeah, I love that show. Love that
and
show.
they really do prove that people are good. And even if you're taking local buses, people will try to put you on the right bus or look out for you. And yeah, I think it's quite cool, and that's why getting off the beaten track is so rewarding as well. You get to meet
I
people.
mean, really, it ties into that historical sense of okay. The main thing I can think of is pilgrimage, and when or seeking alms. Say you're going on a long journey, and you're like, "Hello, the poor traveller seeking alms from the
It's
farmhouse."
very true.
And so it really ties in, doesn't it, with that? Because I remember, I think it might have been when you were traveling in the Balkans, and I may be wrong, so correct me. And you were sharing all the meals you were having, and you were like breaking bread with people, and like they were inviting you into their home.
All the time.
And did you have, so the question is twofold. Did you know really where any of those people were before you turned up? And the second question is, you visited lots of historic sites and gave so much information about those sites. Did you already have that info, or did you learn it when you were there and you were sharing as it was happening?
Great question. Thank you for appreciating my historical facts, which may or may not be true because I just write what people tell me. So the people I never know beforehand. With the exception of a few people, like I just went in Morocco and stayed with my good friend who I met while I was hitchhiking, but he was in a
Oh,
hostel.
okay.
Um, but yeah, I just, you meet people when you travel alone because people are interested in you. If you travel with someone else or if you travel with a group, people aren't gonna get involved because they think, oh, I don't want to bother them. People
Mhm.
are respectful, and people are also very curious though, so they really, really want to talk to you. But if you're
Yeah.
with in a couple or with your friend, they're like, oh no, let's just leave them be. But if you're on your own, suddenly you're just like, oh my gosh, where are you from? What are you doing here? Why are you traveling alone? Why aren't you married? That's the big one. Now I'm old. Why aren't you married? Where are your children? I'm like, lol. I'm just a massive loser in most of the world. Is what I've found out as I get older. But the people that you meet they might be the best question that you get asked when hitchhiking is, are you in a hurry? Always say no, because they will then proceed to take you back to their house in Herzegovina of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they will show you their working watermill and their bees, and they will feed you honey from the hives and explain how the watermill is actually bashing all those big Eastern European blankets to clean them before the
Wow.
winter
Oh, yeah.
sets in and dry them out in the hot sun of September. And yeah, you wouldn't get to do that if you had said, "Oh, actually, I really need to get to my hostel by this and this time," because
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter when you get there. And someone will always make sure you get there.
And it's like you're having snapshots of their daily life. You're getting a view into life as it's happening, and the
Completely.
traditions, the kind of what at different times of the year, different times of the month.
Yeah. The seasonality that we have missed a lot of in Western culture is still very much alive in these places, and the traditions and things that go with it. Um, and then, often because people will feel like, oh, I'm making them late, they will then take you exactly where you need to be. When I was in New Zealand, that was the first place I hitchhiked, actually. I was in
Right.
this big pickup truck with this guy, and the pickup truck broke down on a Sunday in the Nelson Lakes National Park in South Island, which is one of the most beautiful places you could ever possibly hope to get stuck with a broken down car. But because it was a Sunday, we had a long wait for the repairs to come out, and so we just hiked up the mountain and just watched the world go by and
Wow.
chatted and just enjoyed it. It was such a nice place to be stuck. And then when it was repaired and everything, he felt so bad. I don't know why, but he drove me right to my hostel, and you know, he didn't have to. He went well out of his way. So yeah, people are good. And I think, the other thing is, like, what do people get back from a hitchhiker? And it's just, he would have had to do the ride on his own and been stuck on his own, and he would have rather had some company and someone to share that view with. And um, that's at least how he said. And he was really respectful when he dropped me off at the hostel. He was like, at the time I had a partner, and he said, "Look, I know you have a boyfriend, so I'm going to respect that, but if you had been single, I would have asked if you wanted to come back and stay at mine because we had such a nice day together." And I was like, "That's really sweet, thank you, and
That's
that's
really
kind of you."
yeah. So I would have made a move, but I didn't.
Yeah, exactly. I am a gentleman. God bless
That's
him.
sweet. Do you learn the history of certain places in advance, or is you mentioned word of mouth. When you get to these places, are you researching when you're there in situ, or how do you do it?
This is so embarrassing. I am so unlearned about the world, and major conflicts will pass me by, and I will go to that country and I'll be like, no way, I had no idea about the Balkans all hating each other. What? And honestly, I think sometimes it's better that you know less before you go, or you just wouldn't go because you'd say, oh no, that's a war zone until about 5 minutes ago. When I was in Myanmar, I was actually, that was another place I hitchhiked. I actually ended up in jail for hitchhiking there because I went down a big road where you're not supposed to hitchhike. Um, it
Wow.
wasn't also that. It was also because the truck drivers ended up letting me stay in their house because there was no place to stay. It was stupid. I was being silly. I just really didn't want to take the bus all the way back to Mandalay to go all the way down to Inle Lake, which is a whole other bus ride. And
These
so,
everyday issues, these everyday problems.
these everyday issues. Well, I got off the train, hitched along the road, ended up at this Nepali truck stop, sang some Bollywood songs with the Nepali owners who were lovely. They fed me and watered me and flagged down a corn truck that I lay in the back of. It was getting dark. It was slash and burn season, so the burning was happening and you could see nothing but blackness and fire and stars.
Wow.
It was so trippy.
Oh
I was
my
lying in the back of
goodness.
this corn truck thinking, I don't know where I'm going to end up tonight, but it was the most peace I'd ever felt. And I think that's the thing about hitchhiking that I love, is that you have zero control over what's going to happen, so you really can't worry about it. I'm
Yeah.
such a worry wart. I'm such a annoying type A that I really
Oh,
enjoy taking myself out of that and forcing
I would
the
never
the
have guessed that.
chaos.
I would never have.
Thanks, I hide it so well.
Yeah.
But in Myanmar, for example, you are seeing very much a curated element of what the government wants you to see. And when I didn't, when I wasn't expecting what happened, I just wanted to go down that road, and I'd heard tell of a monastery that you could, as a tourist, stay in on that road. And I was trying to head for the monastery, and I had plenty of time, and the truck drivers were headed in that direction, and it was only 10 kilometers. I could have walked it. It was a straight road, but they insisted that I stay in their house, and their wives cooked me dinner, and we sat on the floor and watched Korean soap operas. And I went out to the well to brush my teeth, and when I came back in, their faces had changed, and I was like, "Yeah, I knew this would happen because it's so illegal to have any tourists stay in your house. You have to be registered in a proper government
Oh
official
my
guest
good. I mean,
house."
I can imagine that. I can imagine that. Yeah. But
Yeah, and I felt awful. They took me to the police station. The police put me on a wooden bench and questioned me. And thank God for David Beckham, because when I said I was English, they were like, "Oh, David Beckham," because they love football and they love men in sarongs. So David Beckham saved my life.
Mark, do you
But
have a
no,
question?
No, no, I was just picturing David Beckham in a sarong for a moment there. So do carry on. I'll
with his cornrows,
stay in that moment.
Okay, so
delicious.
you really have run the gamut. Yes.
Just quickly with that one, I felt really bad because I thought I'd got the family in trouble, but apparently, and I ended up getting that the police could not have been nicer. Once they realized that I was just being a massive idiot, just another dumb white tourist, they let me stay overnight in the police cell, like in the office, not the cell. They let me sit in the cell for a picture because they thought it would be funny, and then they showed me how the door locked from the inside because I was obviously in a police station full of men. Um, they let me sleep on the chief's sun lounger and try on his hat. And all night long, I didn't sleep. I was so worried about that family. I thought they'd get in trouble. And yeah, I was so worried for them. And, they might lose their truck license or whatever. And they put me on a bus in the morning, a local bus, and the locals were like, I kept hearing the word of where I had come from, because obviously they're like, who is that? What is she doing in this bus? Where is she going? Kind of thing. So I arrived at Inle Lake, I checked into my hostel, and luckily there was a Danish man staying there who had lived in Myanmar for many years and worked he was like an ambassador for Denmark. And he knew a lot about the ins and outs of Burmese Myanmar culture, and he said the police are always on the side of the people. It's the military you have to watch out for. So the people,
Okay.
they won't get in
Makes
trouble.
sense. So you left it all fine. Their trucks weren't taken away. They're not
Yeah,
living a
well, I
terrible.
felt really stupid, and that's another reason why I would never really advocate for hitchhiking. Because yeah, I got lucky that one time, but it's not only you have to think about the impact you have on other people as well.
Yeah.
And so as a result, since then I've really just stuck to Eastern Europe, Western Europe. countries where you sort of know the lay of the land a little bit better.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you would want was someone's good deed to get them in trouble for any reason.
Yeah, precisely. Well, that's very mindful and respectful of you. That's very good. Why King George III?
Wait, live, left King George III.
Yeah.
Okay. So after I graduated uni, I was unemployed for many months, and I was just volunteering in 5 different places. Like, archaeology graduates, raise your hands. We've all been there. Um,
Mm.
but I ended up getting a job at Kew Palace and Kew Gardens, which is one of Historic
Oh,
Royal Palace's
yeah.
properties. I was playing the long game. I always wanted to work at the Tower of London.
Right.
Hashtag Tower of Fundin. I
Yeah.
do now, which is great. I love it so much. It's probably my favorite place on earth.
Yeah.
But to get in, I got into Kew Palace, and Kew Palace was the summer residence of King George III, and he was just such a nice guy. Like, he loved his family. He had all these mad hobbies. I think that's why I liked him so much, like designing military uniform and growing plants. And he encouraged them to bring sheep over to the Antipodes, and that's why there's so many sheep over there with merino wool. And he has all these like really long reaching impacts. And yes, he lost the colonies, and American tourists were always like, "Why do you like King George so much?" It's like, he was just cool. Um, I just appreciate an eccentric person who really didn't wish badly of the world in general. He was, he was very sheltered. There's a lot of scandals with Lord North, etc., in his early years, and obviously he did have mental health issues. And I
Yeah.
think that's in later years there's been a big 180 where they've said, "Hang on, let's learn more about this character
Yeah.
and the sort of
Absolutely.
person that he was." And I know that Kew Palace a couple of years ago they did a big well, it's not a big palace, they couldn't do a big exhibition, but they did a small exhibition about his mental health. And there is something there to Kew Palace. When you go up to the top floor where it's unfinished, and you sort of, if you just stay there for a while, you can feel old houses and old buildings, Mock, as you know, have a certain something about them, and they do really have an energy. And I think Hugh was where he spent the last years of his life, and he finally ended up in Windsor. And they put straw down to cover the funeral carriage of his beloved wife, Queen Charlotte, so that he wouldn't be distressed, because he didn't understand that she'd passed away. And his favorite daughter, Amelia, who was born on my birthday, 7th of August, gang, rise up. Amelia, he believed in his later years that his favorite daughter had not died really young at 27, that she was living a happy life, and that she was off in Germany, and she would come back any moment. Yeah,
Oh.
an interesting character
Well,
for
yeah.
sure.
So I knew there'd be a lot to that to answer that question.
Yes.
So you're now working at the Tower of London. How is that? What are you doing there? Like, what's the vibe?
The Tower of Funded.
Yeah.
So every time someone asks me that, I say very little, but that's just a joke, because actually we do loads of stuff. But if you were to see us in a gallery, we are mostly there in our very smart uniforms, telling people not to take photos of the crown jewels. And in the White Tower, we talk a bit about like what a garderobe is. It's a toilet, and directing people to the actual toilet, the modern toilet. On the late night events, drunk people do mistake the garderobes for normal toilets,
Oh no.
which is never fun.
Oh no.
But I am what's called a warden there. I'm just a casual, but I've met the best friends of my life from the Tower of Fundin, and the people there. It's really like a big family. And what's cool is like we have these monthly socials in the club, which is the Keys, which is the pub in the tower,
In the
and
tower.
as
I
well
know the
as
one you mean. Yeah.
yeah, as well as very cheap beer, and like there's always like a disco and a raffle, and Fluff, who organizes it, really does so well. It's so much fun there. It's just great. It's everyone gets to know each other, and of course you get to know all the yeoman warders and their families and their pets, and it is just lovely. I love the way we work together. It's so
I love
nice.
that about this country, particularly in London. And you have these strange little worlds within worlds. For example,
Exactly.
in the city is the city of London operates in a very strange way. And I don't mean the businesses so much, but more like the guilds and the different worshipful companies. And it's just very, very antiquated. And again, the Tower of London. Mock took me to Windsor because he's a fellow. Um,
Cool.
and they, we were let into areas that people don't normally go into, and there's sort of, people living in their own lodgings there, and so
I
Amazing.
think that's what people forget. These historic buildings, whether it's a palace, whether it was a prison and a palace, there are communities still living in them now. So yeah, I'm a fellow at Windsor Castle, and what I love is when I get to stay overnight and the doors close. And then you're there in this sort of bizarre village where you have people coming out onto from these little kind of houses, coming out and having barbecues. You've got people jogging around the White Tower. You've got people sort of,
Yeah,
putting out in the summer, putting out kind of deck chairs outside St. George's Chapel and having a glass of wine.
incredible.
And that's the same sort of thing, But I love the fact that it's still being used and enjoyed by contemporary people. It's not just a relic, it's actually still being experienced. Whether during the day it's experienced as a piece of history, but at night or in the evening and at weekends when it's closed, it's being experienced as it was, as a bustling community.
Just as William the Conqueror would have wanted.
and it must be the same with the old tower, the Tower of Fundon. Have you
Yeah,
ever stayed over?
I haven't stayed over, no, but it's it's always a possibility. There's always the flats for various people to stay in. I've never got drunk enough that I've needed to stay over. And also I'm only like a 40-minute cycle home, so 35 minutes when I've been drinking. Shh. But yeah, it is very very doable.
Plan for the future. We do not advise drinking and cycling.
No, nor hitchhiking,
We do not advise hitchhiking.
but we do advise King George III.
Okay, so Elowyn, finally, tell me a little bit about the foreshore tours you are running and it's part of Thames Explorer, isn't it? What
Yeah,
exactly are
that's
you
right.
doing?
So Thames Explorer Trust is a really great organization that takes adults, children, community groups, private tours down to the foreshore. We don't just run history walks looking at archaeology, we also take kids on boat trips, a lot of whom have never been on a boat before, and it's really exciting for me to take them on a boat, and they're like, what, herons roost in trees, miss, that's mad, and that kind of thing. And we also do ecology walks where we find things like flounder and elvers and all sorts of things living in the water, so to show how much it's changed since the biological death of the river in the 1970s. But the mudlarking tours are really special because mudlarking is such a difficult thing to do. Obviously, without the permits being issued at the moment, and also during lockdown, people got more and more interested in mudlarking. So
Yeah,
many great books have been published, and so many great YouTube channels, and of
thank
course,
you.
our friend Instagram has really made it applicable to the masses. But the Thames Explorer Trust is licensed to take people down, and when I've got my bright high-vis yellow vest on, I'm licensed to take people down. So we find the most basic things you could imagine: pottery, pipe stems, pipe bowls. Someone, not us, but someone else on the foreshore once found a homemade explosive.
Yeah,
That was interesting. Luckily, it wasn't my group, and they disposed of it well. So luckily, I didn't have to do anything with that. Just random things you can find. Luckily, no human remains as of yet.
yeah, fingers
But
crossed.
it's a really great way to responsibly engage with the river, and we throw all our finds back at the end. I like to offer them back to the goddess of the river and say thank you for the finds, so that not only can people find them in the future, but also it just reminds people that we are responsible for our river. And if you take everything home, then there's not going to be anything to find. And as you know, we've
Yeah,
noticed as mudlarks that the fines have decreased
they have,
substantially
yeah.
in the last 10 years since it's got popular.
They have definitely, but I think also because there's so many more people on the foreshore, there's there are still finds there, but perhaps so many people that more people are finding more things. So yeah, it's interesting that you said the river goddess, because I had this conversation the other day about the moniker Old Father Thames and the spirit, the personification of the river. I was talking to my friend Charles, and he said, "Oh well, I call rubbish on that. That's just a male patriarchal thing. It shouldn't be Old Father Thames. If anything, the river is like Mami Wata, like a female body, a female spirit." I yeah. So
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Mami Wata and the condom leg goddesses have a lot in common as well with the West African river goddesses as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He's big into
But I
that.
mean, I don't know that much about Roman history, but I just love the name Sulis Minerva from Bath, you know, that goddess.
Yeah,
So I
yeah, yeah.
kind of think, well, it's all the water's connected at some end, but I quite like the idea of it being a river goddess. She gives and she takes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like the Seven. The Seven has a river
Mm,
goddess as well.
there
I
you
think
go. And a
can't
boar.
remember her name. Yeah, so there we go. Elowyn, we could chat for hours. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. And so your Instagram is at elowyn.the.warrior.
Yep, that's me. Warrior, not warrior, although
Yeah.
sometimes it definitely feels like the other one. Thank you so much for having me. It has been an absolute pleasure. I can't wait to hear the rest of the people's podcasts and to be among such interesting other interviewees. It's been really nice. Thank you
Oh,
so much.
fantastic. See you soon. Bye.
Bye!
Oh, well, that was fascinating. She's absolutely brilliant, isn't she?
Yeah, she is really great. Just so many adventures and so much to learn. So, yeah.
So, talking of learning, what did you learn from Elowyn.the.warrior today?
I really loved about what Elowyn was saying is how she engages with people and communities when she travels. Now, for me, someone who does a lot of research about artifacts and sort of the past with mudlarking, it's really good having secondary resources, books, programs, podcasts,
For example,
for example. But it's in addition to that, that primary resources of talking to people, engaging with what they're doing, whether it's listening to their histories, listening to their everyday life, and getting involved. I like how she gets involved. So yeah, that's what I took away. And what about you? What did you learn from Elowyn?
I mean, I could learn so much, and I'm certainly going to go to the Tower of Fundon. I think it's brilliant as well. I'm a bit of a control freak, as you know. Like Elowyn, I like to know where I'm sleeping tonight, and I plan my diary, weeks in advance. But when she talked about being on that truck and not knowing where she was going to sleep, and just kind of surrendering to what was happening, being very present, I thought I could probably get some life skills learnings from that. So I was thinking, how can I perhaps be a little bit more present as opposed to kind of planning and being in control? Let myself perhaps lose control a little bit more and see where it takes me.
Gosh, two great takeaways there that we've had. So yeah.
Thank you everyone for listening today. If you have any comments or any questions, we would love to hear from you. Remember to email us on lovehistorypodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe and follow the podcast to make sure you don't miss our fabulous episode, which is coming up next week. So take care. Enjoy the foreshore, Old Father Thames. This is Gay Aristo saying goodbye, and we'll see you next week.